gonna bleed for me.
Welcome into Shoot Another Flyers Show. That's right, episode 25 coming your way right now ahead of a really exciting week in Philadelphia Flyers hockey. I'm Christopher Babos with Metro Philadelphia, Philadelphia Sports Network, and we're here to bring you some exciting talk about the Philadelphia Flyers and if I'm going to be honest, an even more exciting talk with a buddy that's become a quick friend of mine. Shane McCoy is a scout in the NHL, the AHL, and the ECHL world. So really awesome chance to sit down and talk to him about the entire first round of the NHL draft that's coming up this weekend. But before we get to all of that, Flyers general manager Daniel Briere drops a bombshell on the NHL yesterday, trading for 24-year-old forward Trevor Zegras, a hybrid center/winger. He's 268 games in the NHL, 67 goals, 119 assists for 186 points. Last season, played 57 games, scored 12 goals and 20 assists for 32 points in a season that he's admitted today that he struggled a bit, being in the trade rumors and having his name thrown about where he's going to end up. And he ends up with a couple of buddies of his. Jamie Drysdale, former teammate with the Anaheim Ducks. And then, of course, you've got Cam York, who's a Southern California boy himself. So Zegras now moving to Philadelphia with a couple of friendly faces that he'll at least know when he arrives in Voorhees, New Jersey, whenever that ends up being, probably closer to NHL training camp. Outgoing, because you got to give to get in the NHL, Ryan Poehling, a second-round pick in the 2025 draft and a fourth-round pick next year in the 26 draft. Ryan Poehling put together a pair of really good seasons for what the Philadelphia Flyers could expect from the bottom six forward. He ended up playing, just looking at the math, over 140 games for Philadelphia, 59 points for the Flyers, and was essentially a cast-off after playing in Pittsburgh. So good asset management for the Flyers to be able to turn Ryan Poehling, a bottom six winger, into a reclamation project like Trevor Zegras. And let's get this correct. Trevor Zegras is a reclamation project. He definitely has some warts in his game. He's not very committed to the defensive side of the puck. But on the flip side, the offensive skills that we got to see with a player like Matvei Michkov last year, you add another player that's got some of those skills in his game, is incredibly exciting. They're hard to find in the NHL. And that's really what I think the crux of the issue is trying to find the right players at an affordable cost. I was stunned, absolutely blown away. Danny Briere didn't give up a first-round pick in this draft. He had 3 of them. I guarantee Pat Verbeek asked. Had to have. He didn't even give Anaheim's second-round pick back. He's going to make made the Ducks take Columbus's pick, which is a couple of picks later. So definitely exciting times for the Flyers. It may or may not work. It's tough to tell how exactly that's all going to go, but you take a shot on a player that was not that long ago drafted 9th overall in the 2019 NHL draft and 268 games of experience at 24 years old is definitely one of those things to get excited for. When you think about how Trevor Zegras is going to fit alongside the rest of the players here in Philadelphia. I'm not going to spend too much time on the Zegras information. A lot of that information is definitely floating out on the interwebs. So we'll transition into the NHL draft that's upcoming this weekend, and the chat we had with Shane McCoy. I did an intro at the beginning of it, so I'm going to do my best not to rehash everything. But just to set the situation up, the Flyers do have 6 picks inside the top 50 in this weekend's NHL draft. You got picks 6, number 22 from Colorado, and number 31 from Edmonton. 22 was a part of the Sean Walker deal 2 years ago, and then the Flyers traded back last season with the Oilers when they were sitting at number 32 for the first round pick this year. They end up moving up a spot. They get 31 this year from the Western Conference champion Oilers. In the second round, the Flyers will be on the clock pretty quickly, 36, 40, and 48. 36 is their own pick, 40 is the Cutter Gauthier trade, and 48 is from Calgary in the Joel Farabee Morgan Frost trade. So a ton of options available at his disposal for Danny Briere and what he's going to be able to do with the Flyers roster. It's the Flyers are definitely going to get a good player at 6, assuming they make that pick. There's a lot of trade winds blowing. It's tough to believe. It's tough to believe a lot of people the week before the draft. There's a lot of people saying a lot of different things and trying to get their own information out in the way that they want that information disseminated. So it's definitely a situation where you have to kind of keep an eye open leading into any draft in professional major sports. The other thing the Flyers are actively doing is looking for a goaltender. I believe it was, I think it was Friedman yesterday. It was one of the big pundits that said the Flyers are up there with Detroit and Edmonton on the hunt for a goaltender to pair with Sam Ersson. So that'll be interesting to see if the Flyers are able to get anything done before July 1st when the NHL free agency period opens, and what the crease looks like for Philadelphia. They took one step in their goal in finding a top 6 forward they hope slots into the center position. Whether or not Zegras can stick there after 2 years on the wing, we'll find out. But ultimately, it's continuing to add assets. The first time Danny Briere's really added to the Philadelphia Flyers roster. So exciting moments for the Flyers. I wouldn't expect them to be major players this season in free agency, but you never quite know how that goes leading into July 1st. We do have a live show planned for a live reaction on pick number 6 on Friday. So we'll get that information out as quickly as possible just to kind of, capture the excitement. It's not very often or it really shouldn't be very often that you're picking inside the top 10 of any draft for the teams that you cover. So we'll have a live reaction for the 6th pick, and then we'll probably follow up with 22 and 30 along with the second round next Tuesday, as I am booked on Saturday. Really excited for the opportunity to travel up to Lehigh Valley and attend the Eagles charity softball game, or Devonta Smith charity softball game, rather. A bunch of his Eagles teammates will be there. I'll get to be on the field and do some photography for Philadelphia Sports Network. So I'm stupid excited for that opportunity. But unfortunately, it also falls on a really tough day in the NHL schedule, which is a very busy Saturday afternoon at the NHL Draft in Los Angeles. It is decentralized, this draft, so the Flyers will be operating out of Atlantic City. So it's probably where you'll get a lot of the information in Flyers land. So that'll basically wrap up what I've got as far as the Trevor Zegras and the draft information. The Flyers do pick pretty high. So a bunch of questions about whether or not Caleb Desnoyers will fall to the Flyers. Jake O'Brien, Brady Martin are names I've definitely heard linked to Philadelphia. James Higgins was apparently in town. I personally think that's a bit more of a smokescreen. 5'10", 5'11" forward, depending upon which websites you're looking at. Trevor Zegras is 6 foot, has a ton of skill. Did they just basically acquire an older version of James Higgins? Tough to say. But I do feel like a lot of the NHL is sleeping on Higgins. So it'll be interesting to see if he's available at 6 and what the Flyers decide to do. What can the Flyers do to add to their prospect pool 22, 30, 36, 40. Those are some high end assets in the NHL. And then, of course, the big question: 6'5" Roger McQueen, 6'4" Jack Nesbitt. Are they still around in the 20s when the Flyers are looking to pick? So it should be a very exciting Friday and a Saturday. And we had a chance to chat with Shane McCoy about all of that. So we'll be right back with our interview with Shane McCoy, scout for the NHL, AHL, and the ECHL. Talk to you. Welcome back inside Shoot, another Flyer show. And Chris Babos here, Philadelphia Sports Network. And we've got a special guest with us today, somebody that I've become fast friends with over the last year or so. His name is Shane McCoy. He's an NHL, AHL, and ECHL scouts. Can't really do better than that in the world of hockey. Helped the Florida Everblades to 3 straight Kelly Cups in the ECHL. And then most recently, assisting the Florida Panthers with back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. So we'll welcome in Shane McCoy. Shane, how you doing today?
I'm very good, Chris. How are you? Just survived another rainstorm here down in South Florida, but we're hanging in there.
Yeah, that'll definitely happen very quickly. Fun day in Flyers land. The Trevor Zegras news landed about 2 hours ago. The Flyers traded Ryan Paling, a second-round pick this year and a fourth-round pick next year for Zegras, and a pretty classic buy low move. But before we get on to that, you had some shout-outs you wanted to throw out to the organizations that have taken care of you.
Yeah, 15 years ago, Dale Talon was the general manager of the Florida Panthers, came in from the Chicago Blackhawks, and started a whole program called the Blueprint. And it was about building a Stanley Cup winner through free agency, through the draft, through trades. And a few players that were picked back then actually have made appearances in a recent Stanley Cup finals. Zach Hyman, who was a Panthers draft pick, did not have a chance to play this year for the Oilers due to injury, but he was actually originally a pick by the Panthers. Many folks don't realize that. Also, Dmitry Kulikov, who returned to the Panthers in style these past few seasons. He was originally drafted by Dale Talon. But I would say that over the years, and Bill Zito has really put an exclamation point on all that. Brett Peterson, Roberto Luongo, who came back as a goalie, now works in the goalie department. They've all done such a fantastic job building that team. And you've seen second chances for so many of those guys. A player like Bennett, a player like Kachuk, a player like Marchand, even other guys, like Thomas Nosek, AJ Greer. They have built those Stanley Cup teams through guys who have been around, who have had good careers, but they all were molded together into a Stanley Cup or two. And that's really what other organizations are trying to accomplish right now. The players are out there, the pieces are at your disposal, but you have to find the right mix at the right time. And I think sometimes you might get lost in the fact that, oh, we didn't draft well, or he might be too old, or he's too young, he's not ready yet. It's all about putting that whole group together. And I think that's what Paul Maurice has really done well as a coach. And a lot of credit to those guys for being able to mold it all together, taking scouting information, doing everything that they can when it counts the most to get the wins, to get the job done. And I think it all started, 15 years ago. But and that's what the Flyers and other teams are trying to do right now. The Capitals, even the Anaheim Ducks, who are looking at a bit of a rebuild.
Yeah, the New York Islanders sitting with the number 1 overall pick, trying to find chemistry in that room in a team that definitely has some building blocks to go with up there. But it makes me think of the movie Major League
Mm-hmm.
and just how important chemistry is when everybody is pushing in the same direction, and that's what the Flyers are trying to find, and they have a big opportunity to do that here this year in the draft. Philadelphia picks 6, 22, and 31 this year, so a boatload of picks. But even more so is finding the chemistry, and the trade for Zegras today goes a long way. Gets repaired with his buddy Jamie Drysdale, who was
Yeah.
shipped out of Anaheim a couple of years ago. Cam York, who's a restricted free agent, a lot of questions surrounding him. Southern California native. So does that you know
help raise his game a little bit as the Flyers try to unlock his potential.
Yeah, and I really think it does. And I believe they have Rick Tocchet as the answer for coach right now, because you're going to see in his career that players have followed him. And whether it's Vancouver or elsewhere when he was an assistant coach, of course, very, very prolific with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, he has had some good stops as a player and also as a coach. But I think Rick is going to have that following effect. And Joe Quenneville will as well. Some of the coaches, getting that first call right now, even somebody like Marco Sturm. But I think with Rick Tocchet, he brings a certain level of compete and drive. You just see the way he played, and it's the way he coaches is the way he wants you to play. But I think there are some really good picks available for the Flyers this year in the draft. And this draft might be a little different from others in the past. You look back at 2015, which was just a huge draft class. You had, Stanley Cup winners, future Hall of Famers. But this might be a bit of a surprise this year, because I would not be surprised if some of your lower draft picks, a few guys who dropped down through the second or third round, in hindsight, end up being the big winners. I'm looking at a player, Porter Martone. I had a chance to watch his dad back when he played. Very defensive defenseman, physical guy. Won a Kelly Cup with the Mississippi Sea Wolves. Won in juniors with the Petersboro Petes. But Porter is a very offensively gifted forward. He's a big guy like his dad, but he's not quite as physical. He's got a lot more finesse, a lot more touch, and he is just starting to get into his offensive game right now. So that's one player that I'm really looking at. And I'm also looking at a few guys, out of the London Knights. And one player that you've talked about quite a bit is Henry Buchnevich, who is a big guy, has a lot of promise. He's also a right-handed defenseman. It's very hard to find good right-handed defensemen in the NHL. You look at a team like Trois-Rivières, who just won the Kelly Cup in the ECHL. Almost every player on the roster for defense was left-handed. They only had one righty. But it's really hard to find those good right-handed defensemen who can make it up and stick. And you're calling Buchnevich is somebody who could really pay off big for the Capitals or for the Flyers or for some other team. He might go a bit as an unsung hero right now, but in hindsight, he could be the type of player that somebody really needs.
He's definitely in line to get a heavier share of work now. Oliver Bonk graduated out of London. Sam Dickinson's graduated out of London. So, yeah, I think whoever ends up landing Buchnevich is probably going to be pretty happy with that pick. Let's start at the top of the draft, because that's primarily what I think Flyers fans are gonna kind of want to know about, because there are so many options. It seems to be a consensus, and after talking with them at the combine, I'm not stunned in any way. Matthew Schaefer should go number 1 to the New York Islanders, despite all the James Higgins chatter, despite the fact that, I guess in some circles you could argue Michael Lisa would have a potential, but honestly, it kind of goes back to what you're saying. You get the chance to take a stud defenseman, and I think if I remember correctly, the Islanders were at like 9 or 11 instead of 1. So I think you take that gift horse in the mouth, you run to the podium, you grab Schaefer. I've heard some chatter this morning that Misa could not go to. I don't buy it. Everybody lies this time of year. So I personally think that the draft starts at 3 with Chicago. Would you agree with that?
I would. And there was some talk that Schaefer might not go first. And I think that, you always have your online trolls who try to stir up a little bit of, talk, in the months leading up to the draft. But I would say right now that pretty much hands down, it's going to be Schaefer as that number 1 draft pick. In the past, we've had some discussion about 2 and 3 kind of going different ways. But I would say this year, what you just said is pretty much point on.
All right. So then that brings us to Anton Frondell. Anton Frondell is absolutely wicked shot. And as a young player, that's one of those things that we see a lot on tape, especially from these kids from overseas, from Russia, from Sweden. I don't know personally, and granted, I haven't been scouting for all of that long. I don't think I've ever seen a shot look as dynamic on tape as Frondell's. Just with the power that he's able to have behind it at his age. What do you make of his draft stock and where he kind of fits in that the I guess top 10 of the draft? Where does he land to become most successful in the NHL?
I think he really fits in well with a new niche. You've seen in the past where players are graded on skating. Skating is probably the most important thing you can have at this time of year. But you've always, people have always talked about shot in terms of the hardness of the shot, the quickness of the shot. But I think what really strikes me about Fondell the most is his shot release. It's a hard, quick shot, but his release is so dynamic. And I think that is probably the most dynamic asset that he has as a player. And there's a lot more to develop with him, but I think that shot release is what's going to get him drafted. And I think he will
Correct
go
me,
high.
correct me if I'm wrong. That's what makes Austin Matthews so dynamic is his shot release,
Yes,
correct?
yes. And that
So
was right around the time the game was becoming faster, bigger. You've seen the sticks become so lightweight and so dynamic. And Matthew still has that dynamic shot release. Yes, there are other elements to his game which need work, but he still has one of the best shot releases in the league. And you see the damage that can do on opposing goalies as well.
absolutely. I guess we're jumping a little over the board here, but his teammate out there in Djurgården, Victor Eklund, and his I wouldn't necessarily call it a rise up the board, but I feel like he interviewed pretty well at the combine. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to find his way into that top 15.
Yeah, he really is an interesting player as well. And I think, the combine that you attended this year is really an opportunity to show people like you and to show others what they can do, not necessarily on the ice all the time, but also off the ice with his interview, with some of his performances. And, he's a young player. There's a lot to develop. Getting a little bigger, getting a little stronger, filling out the frame. Those are all things discussed. But he is one of those players that I can see going high or dropping down a bit more. And when the redraft comes 5 or 10 years later, seeing where his career has taken him, he might be more of a diamond in the rough. He's not really being talked about a lot right now. He is in the mix, but you look at Brandon Saad from some years ago. Brandon Saad was slated to go in the first round. Pretty much every National Hockey League team passed up on him. He got slated in the end with the Chicago Blackhawks and was a very important part of a few of their runs.
Absolutely. Talking about the Blackhawks and somebody that could slide right past them, and that's James Higgins.
So right about here is where I had some technical difficulties with Shane McCoy. So we got that situated, but I did want to just pop in and apologize for the technical difficulties. So here is the second half of the interview with Shane McCoy.
Back into Shoot Another Flyer show. We're back with Shane McCoy. Got some technical issues addressed. We're talking about James Higgins and where he kind of slots into this draft picture. Shane?
I think he could be an awesome pick for the Flyers. And this is one player that I look at who could be someone that the Philadelphia Flyers take high up in the draft. They're going to have an option to bring him off the board at some point if they go ahead and play their cards right. And I just look at him as a player who could really slot well with their core right now, the roster that's developing and coming up. They have quite a few young players, and he has that ability to be a dynamic player for the future, to be a new part of that core. So personally, if I'm the one making a call on him, I'm trying to get him in as a Flyer from the draft. That's my personal. I think he is slated to go as a Flyer if they so choose.
They'll have a chance at 6. He's definitely within that territory. How much do you make? Because this is a big question in Flyers land. How much do you make of the size issue? And the fact that the Flyers kind of have a relatively small core and they want to get bigger. So there is a lot of talk of, well, you can't take another player that's 5'10".
Right, and I understand that, but at the same time, the Flyers are a team that's very much in flux right now, and Rick Tockett's going to change a lot of what's going on there. And I would say within the next year or two, under his tutelage, you're going to see a very different roster. He wants to see what works, what does not, and also I think there was a time when some of the scouts and some of the people, the powers that be, were getting away from the whole mindset of drafting the smaller players, someone like a Patrick Kane, Brad Marchand, of course, who has been a huge revelation, was not even on the draft board early in his career. But smaller players with the right mix, with the right guys around you, can really make a huge difference. You look at someone like Matthew Tkachuk. Brady is bigger. He really has the size, but the size issue can be talked about for injuries. I understand that, and for being bounced around come playoffs. Being rubbed out on some of your big plays against physical teams. But I think if you build that core around that player, and I really think Hagens is worth it. You've seen what the Blackhawks did back in the day with Patrick Kane. They built that core around him and Tays. Boston built a core around Brad Marchand. He was the longest tenured Boston Bruin. So I think if you want to pick a player who's smaller, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you protect him, build that core around him, and he's a dynamic player. And I think Hagens really has that potential.
That makes perfect sense. In Philadelphia, known to get a few roughhousers, so to speak, in that lineup there. From the rough stuff to somebody that's just always won, Caleb Desnoyers out of Moncton made the run to the CHL Memorial Cup this year, and just overall, like I said, he wins wherever he goes. What has Caleb shown you throughout this draft process?
He almost has a missing link type of asset to his game. And you just mentioned that wherever he goes, the way he plays, the group that he's with, he lifts them up to the next level. And that's something that I'm really looking at this year with these players who have done well at the championship level. Whether it's him or a few of the London Knights, I think that there is a quality to some of these guys, even at a young age, when you see championship caliber, long playoff runs. They add a certain quality. It's their mindset. It's their compete. And they can show, and they have shown, that they can compete deep in playoffs. They can play well longer, because that's always an issue with younger players and junior players, NCAA especially. It's a longer season once you get into pros. There is more going on. You have to have that same compete level for more games. There's more physical exhaustion. And I think the players that show me that at a young age, it's really a good harbinger of things to come.
Okay, absolutely. Another person that's been right up there with Desnoyers in that top six conversation, Jake O'Brien. Jake O'Brien again in another exceptional season out there in Brantford, top six playmaking center, plays with a lot of confidence, and I think that's one of those things that's going to get a lot of teams talking.
No, I agree. And he's another guy who's not really been in the conversation a ton, but I think that wherever he is slotted, some of your younger teams, your developmental teams, should really kind of look at him. So if you're picking as a Capital scout, as a Flyer scout, Seattle Kraken, Boston Bruins, even the Islanders, I think he will go to a team that is looking to develop and get better and get stronger. And there are some really good pieces in this draft. And you just named, I think, one of my top guys as well, that can really become a new part of a core in some of these organizations and these franchises. And, you look at this draft as well, you have quite a few bigger guys. You have a few that need to, put on some pounds and round out. But you have some bigger guys that also are very good skaters. They shoot well. And they have a lot of upside, whether they're offensive or defensive.
And that's kind of the new style of hockey player that you're starting to see, is that bigger athlete that can skate. Before, that was the big knock on your Zdeno Chara. Please don't hurt Chara. 6'9", but quote unquote couldn't skate. Now you're starting to see these 6'6" players like a Roger McQueen, who's able to have that frame with that skating ability. It's impressive.
Another player that I'm really looking at, just to jump off the topic here, Lyndon Lakovich. He's another player that I'm really looking at. He's high on my board because what we just talked about, he kind of fits in, with those qualities. And you see those bigger guys now who can really skate. I remember when the Florida Panthers drafted Peter O'Reilly. Big guy, could stand in front of the net, but did not have that great skating ability. And also with goalies, you see bigger goalies getting drafted now because they can skate well. I think we've made so many advances with technology and with the equipment. These guys are learning more when they're young, and they're learning better in terms of skating and edging. And everything available to them. Some of your bigger players right now, some of the bigger guys going in this draft will end up being some of the best skaters.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of them, I think, that's high on my list, Brady Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Might not crack that top three line. Might top out as a top six forward, but he's got a high compete and a higher motor, and that's something that you can't exactly always buy on the market, so to speak.
Yeah, and you're exactly right about that because when you talk about those third and fourth lines, a player like Martin. I mean, the Florida Panthers the past 2 years, their third and fourth lines got them over the hump in some of these games. Paul Maurice even said that, against Toronto. Some of your third and fourth line players really contributed big. And that's really the new way of winning a Stanley Cup. When you put together these guys like a Nosek, like a Greer, some of the others who can really go ahead and have that motor going in the longer games, overtimes, they can score a goal, they can make a big hit or a big play and kind of get you over the hump. And of course, minor league hockey is all different with the way the lines are set and the rosters. But I think with those third, fourth line guys, teams right now, looking at what Vegas did in 23, the Panthers the past few years, focus on those guys who can be drafted and maybe fit in as a top nine, or a fourth line guy. Players who can skate well, always have that motor going. And you will see a few guys out of this draft, hopefully the first or second round, who end up becoming really great third, fourth line players.
One of those players that's hoping to, I would say, slide into that second round. I'm kind of peeking through my hands like this one because I want to see him fall to the Flyers, maybe towards the end of that 48th pick. It is somebody we talked about before we came onto the show here, and that's Ivan Rybkin. Came
Yes.
over from the KHL, had an uneven season, played for 3 different teams in Russia, came over in January to the USHL, and averaged a point per game. And when he's able to match up against his peers and not necessarily grown men. So I definitely think that he's a top 10 talent that because of his uneven season might get a bit of a raw draft, but could find himself in a good spot.
And also somebody else who's a championship player, Muskegon Lumberjacks, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, that's somebody else who brings that ability to win a cup, to win a championship. And he's done it rather quickly. And I see, I think that today with the draft, you're looking at these players coming up through juniors. It's becoming much more competitive down there. It's getting better and better every year. So when you see a player who has won a championship or two, it says a lot about him as an individual and also as a performer on the ice. But, Rabkin brings that Russian hockey element to his game. The way he plays, his shot release, the way he skates, he's very good around the net, a very good offensive presence. And I had a chance to watch him a little bit, watch some video of him from Muskegon this year. And he really stood out to me as a player who just made that transition. It was really seamless for him. Some younger kids really struggle when they go to a different league or come to a new country. He really accelerated more than anything. I mean, I saw him play great, and you could always tell when he was on the ice because he just stood out. And I think, he is a guy that you have actually slotted for the Capitals maybe to pick in the draft, and could go as a flyer or for someone else as well. And also, if you're one of those teams looking to, get back in the draft order in terms of building your core, having an extra pick, getting somebody in with a first or second round, Rabkin might fall a bit. He might go high. He can go anywhere from the first to the third round, honestly. But he could be a good young prospect for a few of the teams out there trying to, get back to the point where, they're competitive or become competitive for the first time. You might see him end up with the Lightning, end up with the Leafs. You never know. A lot of offensive presence, and I like that element to his game.
It's definitely one of the harder things to find is just that natural skill around the net, the willingness to go to where goals happen, in front of the crease, around the side of the net. I think it's one of the things that has me excited to watch Flyers practices this year with Trevor Zegras and Machkov now. And what are those guys going to be working on? So I think with having 6 picks in that top 50, I think Rybkin's a perfect, pardon the pun, a perfect flyer to take. just in those the presence. But there's going to be a lot of jockeying for position. We've talked a whole heck of a lot about one position group, and that's forwards. But we haven't talked on any of the defensemen. You've got Radim Murtka, who could go in that top 10. Jackson Smith going to Penn State, could go in that top 15. So there's the NHL is always looking for defense, and there's not a ton of defensemen at the top of this draft.
Right, and that's why one of the players that I'm looking at out of London that we've talked about, Henry Bustevich. He's that right-handed D, and he's someone who could really slot in well for the Flyers, for the Capitals, for the teams you cover, but for all the others. But what really impresses me about him is that he is so developed already. Yes, there's more to work on, but I mean, the way he skates, he has good size, and I really feel like he's on the cusp of fitting in well with the NHL game almost right now. And he's a right shot, so he's really someone that I'm looking at out of London Knights. And they have a few other players there that I think are really excellent in terms of defensemen that are still being developed and that are coming along. But he's someone that I really have focused on. You have as well. I know that you're really high on him.
Absolutely, and somebody will kind of transition into this because it's the same franchise, and that's Alexei Med. I even phonetically wrote it out, and I'm still going to get it wrong. Medvedev.
It's actually Medvedev. It's Medvedev.
Medvedev. There we
Yes,
go.
I have been told this by very, and I just nickname him Med. Or, I mean, we all give each other nicknames because the pronunciations get so rough. And you've seen in recent years, we always struggled with Russian names, and now we're struggling with Finnish names because some teams are really stocking up on Finns. You've seen the Panthers do it. Airblades have had a few players coming through their system with European ties, but also the Dallas Stars now, with the Finns. So it's so for Russian, it's actually Medvedev, and I know that Rybkin is Rybkin. There's like a bit of a Y sound in there. But Alexei Medvedev really is my top pick in terms of goalies in this draft. I just really like what I see from him. He has played well, and I think that when the time comes, he can definitely make the jump. And he is just so consistent, so steady. And I think with the right tutelage, there is just so much to work with on him. He is really mechanically, he's strong, technically sound. He has everything that you want in a goalie to be drafted, at this time of year.
Absolutely, and the fact that he's now going to get the opportunity to get a lot of starts in London, with the chance to defend a Memorial Cup. That usually those windows are 4 or 5 years, and Dale Hunter and what they've been able to do up there in London seems to have them poised to have another 2-3 year run. At one of the harder championships to win in Canadian hockey.
Yeah, and you look at 20 years ago, London Knights were voted pretty much the best team in the history of junior hockey. I believe it was the 2005 squad. Corey Perry, was on that team, and he is still playing and being effective at the age of 40. But there were so many other guys on that roster who ended up having really great careers, minor league level, the pros, NHL. So I think, now London is really redoing, what they did in 2005, and they're stretching it out a bit because you just see so many great players coming up with them. And that's one thing that you've talked about, and we have discussed that, focusing on these championship teams, but especially London right now, there are so many more great players there that are coming up and coming along. They're not fully developed. They're going to be ready for future drafts. And I think this is really just the beginning. But Medvedev, and what I've seen, I'm impressed by. And he has the right people around him. He has the right team. But he's just not a goalie who with a good team playing in front of him. He is a good goalie. He is a big part of their success. And I think that's one distinction that sometimes you have to make as a scout. Is the team or the defense making the goalie look great, or is the goalie doing that well to make the team that much better? And I think in this case, Medvedev is making the team that much better.
Yeah, that's 6'3" goaltender, 17 years old, out of Russia. So definitely a prospect that a lot of teams are going to keep their eye on. Let's stick with the Russian goalie theme. What do you know about Semyon Frolov or Peter Andrianov?
I like both. They're not players that I have right at the top of my list. But I think for developmental guys, for Russians that are coming up, I think one of them or both of them might end up being a revelation. I mean, they both need work. It's not going to be a seamless transition like it might be for some of the other guys that we've discussed. But I think for two prospects coming up, they're good players for a team to take a chance on. Personally, I think they can slot in well. They need more development, but I think that with the theme of the Russians this year and in past seasons, we see the Russian players increasingly become better. And I think, back in the day, due to language barriers, so, unless they were like total superstars like Alexander Ovechkin, I think sometimes they needed development. They needed to be brought along. They needed that mentoring, and they did not have other Russians here to help them along. So I think those two players that you just mentioned would really fit in well with certain organizations that have Russian players present, Russian coaches present. They can really find a way to kind of hone their skills and make their way into the lineup.
Absolutely. So resetting here for you, Chris Babos here, Philadelphia Sports Network, talking with hockey scout Shane McCoy. Works basically everywhere in hockey. Worked at the NHL, ECHL, and AHL levels. And if you're wondering why should I be listening to this man talk about goaltenders, he was the goalie consultant for Canada for the 2025 Four Nations face-off. So yeah, I would think Shane knows a little bit about the goaltending position. So let's talk about goalies that could potentially see themselves drafted first or second round. And that would be the top three consensus goalies in the draft. We've got Joshua Ravensburg, Jack Ivankovic, and Michael Pradel, or Pradel. I should look that up. But let's start with Ravensburg. Seems to be the top consensus goalie on the board. What have you seen from him, and where do you think he finds success in the NHL?
I think as a player, as a goalie coming up, he needs work, and I think that he's someone who's more of a long-term project. I do like what I've seen from him. He really could slot anywhere. I think he would really fit in well in a system that has goalies in front of him that can really help him and bring him along. He needs a good goalie coach. So that is one thing that I've seen from him. I don't think that he's my top prospect as a goalie right now. I'm higher on some other guys, but he's someone that will fill a need at some point, could potentially see backup time, needs to round out his game a bit. But I do like his technicals. I do like his mechanics. I've seen video of him. I've not watched him live yet, but what I've seen from the film, what I've seen from his videos, shots, he does well against top players. He reacts. He his rebound control is something that can be worked on. But I can see why so many teams are high on him and looking at him. He's someone who can fill a need. So I think that's why so many organizations right now are kind of looking at him as a prospect or as a top prospect for goalies. It's really hard. Where do you think he's going to end up? It's really hard for me to tell where he might wind up or land as a goalie.
Yeah, I say one of those teams that's got those extra picks in the second round, that first round. So I think Philly that would be happy to come away with any of those goaltenders in one of those spots, whether that's Ravensburg and Ivankovic, even one of the Russians. Like, I think they'll end up getting a goalie, if not potentially two, just to kind of cast your die. And I feel like there's not as volatile a position as goaltender, also because it's just so important to hockey. You can't win unless you keep the puck out your net.
Right, and also the Flyers have been looking for that goalie answer for many years, and this might be a good draft for them to take a chance on a few guys. Because we've seen, they had Bobrovsky at one time, and every Flyers fan in the world right now wants everybody to know that, hey, he was a time. And you had Brizgalov there. Calvin Pickard, I believe, was a Flyer for a brief period of time. So, as you know, I'm very good friends with Bruce Cassidy, who was one of the coaches for Canada. But when Vegas won that Stanley Cup a few years ago, you saw how important that depth in goaltending was, because whoever thought that Aiden Hill was going to start and win a Stanley Cup, after LB went down. And of course, they also had Jonathan Quick as a backup. They had about 4 goalies that could really start and play. And you see that with teams now. They want to load up on those goalies and have that depth. Even the Panthers have made some moves around deadline time. They have that depth so that when playoffs come, if somebody goes down, if somebody can't play a game, you have that next guy up. So I think that with the Flyers, they should take a few chances on goalies. I don't know how ready they will be. Some of these netminders are going to need a lot more room to grow and develop and become better netminders. Because, I always look at angling, positioning, rebound control, RVH, and just adapting to that whole NHL game, the speed, the skill. It's hard to look at a goalie right now against junior players and then see, that same goalie against NHL players. And sometimes it's easier to slot the forwards because of their skating. They have more on display. A goalie is more reactive. So sometimes it's easier to look at a forward and tell you, different things as opposed to looking at a goalie. But I would say this draft class does have some good potential. Who is your favorite of the goalies? And we mentioned Medvedev, but of the 3 you just named, which one are you the highest on? How do you feel?
I like Ivan Kovic a lot out of Brampton. Again, another one of those players that is just very calm, plays with a lot of confidence. So that's one of the things that I look for in a goaltender is, when the rest of the world around you is going to shit.
Yeah.
How are you handling that?
Right.
Are you able to just throw your bottle of water in the air, or the water in the air, follow the droplet down, and you're right back in the game? That's very important. And and honestly, Medvedev, a goaltender from Russia that's already here, already in North America, learning the North American game, and is 6'3".
Yeah.
If I could grow my perfect goalie, it's Ben Bishop down there in Dallas, or formerly down there in Dallas. I think an athletic 6'7" goaltender that can take away the bottom of the net, but still have enough length and height to cover upstairs. I think that's ideal. But again, that goes with the skating aspect of things. At 6'7", generally speaking, it's not the easiest to skate.
Right. And
also, so
yeah, in goalies, they always say should be the best skaters on the team. That's really one thing that is talked about among scouts. And it's interesting that you mentioned Ben Bishop, because I thought he was really a fantastic goalie. Had to retire many years before his time. But if you look at his goals against average for his career, his save percentage, played on good teams, but made those teams even better. Got, knocking on the door of a Stanley Cup once or twice. Really, really a great player, and never really had a chance to reach his full potential due to injury. And another player that I really liked as a goalie was Corey Crawford. I thought he really just accelerated his game and got on top of it more than anyone when it came to those Blackhawks runs. And I think you could argue that without Corey Crawford, maybe Chicago does not win those 2 cups in 2013 and 2015. He was just so dominant, the breakaway saves, the 2-on-1s. And that's something that I'm looking for with these younger goalies coming up. How are they going to handle that breakaway? How are they going to handle that 2-on-1? And Medvedev is one who really kind of, fits the bill in terms of transitioning the NHL game. The other guys, I think they need some work. There's a lot more to go, but I know I do see some potential. And that's really the biggest question in scouting, I think, because, right now this is a Super Bowl of scouting, when you're going into the draft. But I really think that with goalies, there's just so much unknown. You're taking a chance, but you're kind of projecting what might not get projected. You don't know how it's going to turn out for them. You don't know about injuries. You don't know how they're going to make that that adaptation to the NHL game. That's really the mystery of it.
I think there's also somebody that even Flyers fans are talking about that I think has an opportunity to shine next year. I think it was a rough season coming over from Russia, but that's Ivan Fedotov. And, he's, I would call him a late bloomer, given the fact that he's 28 years old and I guess really essentially getting his feet wet in professional hockey after everything he dealt with in Russia. Everybody, at least in the Philadelphia market, expected him to come over from Russia, hit the ground running. It's not exactly that simple when you've got to learn a new language or at least get re-educated in a scenario that you're not familiar with. Oh yeah, and then try to play hockey every couple of days. And oh yeah, we're just going to bring up a third goaltender to, now you can't practice. And so it was definitely a bit of a tough situation. He navigated incredibly well. The few times I got to talk to him, he was chipper happy, and it was just like, I'm here to play hockey. That's what I focus on. So while everyone in the hockey community is like, who are they going to pair with Sam Urson? I think Fedotov really does have a better opportunity here than a lot of people think.
No, I agree with you there. And if you look at some of the Flyers goalies in the past, developmental phase sometimes takes quite a bit, and you need a new team in front of you. You need new coaching, new direction. But if you go back to the '90s and 2000s, after Hextall eventually left the scene, one of them just passed away recently. But Flyers had a few goalies who were late bloomers. And kind of look at Boucher, who spent how many stints did he have with the Flyers? 3 or 4. He was in the lineup, down the AHL, had injuries. But I mean, he served a need and was on that team that went to the 2010 Stanley Cup Finals, as did Michael Leighton. So it's really always been kind of a makeshift goaltending department for the Flyers in a way, with guys coming in and out, going up and down the lineup. But I think that right now, in the next few seasons, they're going to have an answer. And I think they might have a really strong answer in terms of a number one, a good backup, and then a good system, because they've really been kind of, picking at sticks these past few years, trying to get somebody out of Russia, trying to get somebody up from the minors, trying to slot somebody who can fit in well. Just a few years ago, when John Tortorella was trying to make the playoffs, they really didn't have an answer in goaltending, and that eventually cost them a playoff spot. And if they had that answer, the confidence comes from who's between those pipes. It really does. And if your team is looking back there and doesn't see that answer standing there, they realize that, hey, how stable are we? How confident can we be? You look at all your championship teams, whether it's the Airblades with Cam Johnson, you look at Bobrovsky now with the Florida Panthers, you look back there and you see these guys, these towers of power, and you realize that they can do it, and you can do it too. So I really think that Flyers, Philadelphia, once they solve that goaltending issue for sure, that will be the beginning of something really great.
Absolutely. Well, the Flyers definitely have a huge opportunity coming up towards the end of this week. You got 6 picks inside the top 50. And we've broken it down here for you on Shoot Another Flyers show. So thank you very much for joining us here today. Shane will probably try to loop back once we have some answers from the draft and what players these various athletes are going to end up with in the NHL. Before we get out of here, where can individuals that want to find your work, where can they find you, Shane?
Go ahead and send me a direct message. I'm available on Facebook, LinkedIn, Shane McCoy at AOL.com. My name spelled together lowercase at AOL.com, and be more than happy to talk about different draft picks and players, breaking down goalies. And we keep certain things top secret this time of year, so can't give away everything. But some of the other players that are going in this draft, Lennon Likovich, Porter Martone, there are quite a few good players out there that have promise and potential, and it's going to be interesting to see where they end up and where they find their way with what organizations, because I see some guys going as high as the first round, some guys going, second, third round. They could be revelations in the future.
It's going to be very fascinating. Everything gets underway on Friday night out in Los Angeles. We'll be right back to wrap up Shoot Another Flyer show once again here on Philadelphia Sports Network.
All right, so there you have it. Shane McCoy, solid 40-minute interview talking about the NHL draft up and down, and essentially what options exist for the Philadelphia Flyers as they navigate what's going to be an incredibly important draft in the NHL this year. Getting onto gritty question and answers, our guy Kyle, writer for PSN's Philly Squad, checks in. Chris, who do the Flyers take of Martin, Higgins, or O'Brien? Honestly, Kyle, I think that Danny Briere hopes the choice is made for him as best as possible. I think Higgins definitely has some skill that's being slept upon, but a lot of being is being made of that 5'10" height, and and what the Flyers' makeup of their roster is. So if you're able to insulate them with bigger forwards like your Tyson Foragers, you're able to get a Travis Konechny out there to be a bit of a pest. Then somebody like Higgins could work. Jake O'Brien, 6'2". Brady Martin is a 6 foot. So you're pretty happy with either one of them. If that's kind of where Danny Briere ends up going. At number 6, it's maybe a little too high for Jake O'Brien, but again, as you've seen with the Trevor Zegras trade, it's incredibly hard for NHL teams to find talent, especially centers, in that top 6. So ultimately, I do think Philadelphia is going to be happy with whoever they come away with there. If everything was done in a vacuum, I think Higgins has the highest upside. So that would be my pick out of those 3. However, I think the Flyers would probably go O'Brien, Martin, Higgins in that order. So we'll find out in a couple of days. He checked in with a follow-up question. Any chance they take a flyer on a guy like McQueen? I absolutely think the Flyers would love to. He shouldn't be there at 22 unless he majorly slides down the board. He did miss a lot of time this season due to a back injury. He told us at the combine that he was healthy, so that ends up could make a big difference in his draft stock. But there could be teams that kind of put him on the back burner, so to speak, because of the injury, and then fell in love with some other prospects. So that could see him slide down the draft board with the ammunition the Flyers have in the draft, with the draft capital, so to speak. 3 second-round picks. You got 31, you got 22. I wouldn't be stunned to see the Flyers take an opportunity to try to trade up in that draft process and land one of those bigger centers, like a McQueen, like a Jack Nesbitt, O'Brien. If maybe somehow a Porter Martone falls to them, they take Martone the winger at 6, and then are able to go back up to 15 or so and grab an O'Brien or a McQueen. I think Danny Briere and the Flyers fans down in Atlantic City at the draft party would be pretty happy with that outcome. So that's I honestly think the Flyers would be thrilled to come away with a guy like McQueen that, if he wasn't injured, easily is a top 10, if not a top 5 player in this NHL draft. So that'll wrap it up for you. A little shy of an hour as we get ready for the NHL draft this weekend. Stay tuned. A ton of awesome content coming your way with Philadelphia Sports Network here on the YouTube. The NBA draft is tomorrow, so they'll have some awesome content coming your way. Later tonight, you've got the Philadelphia Eagles, your Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Don't forget about that one. And Flipping the Birds will come your way, I believe, at about 7:30. And then we've got Phillies on Friday as your number 1 team in the NL East gets going against the team that took that 2022 World Series title away from them, the Houston Astros. That 3-game set gets underway tonight down in Houston as the Phillies get themselves into a much more difficult aspect of their schedule. But sitting in first place as you close in on July and heading towards the trade deadline at the end of the month is a good place to be in for the Philadelphia Phillies. But this is Shooting Another Flyer Show. I'm your host, Chris Babos. I thank you very much for joining along. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments on the YouTube, and we can get your comments, questions answered next week in gritty questioning and answers, just like we did for Kyle. But once again, Chris Babos signing off. Have a wonderful draft, and we'll talk to you soon with some live reaction for the number 6 overall pick and what's going down on Friday night. Have a lovely evening, everybody, and as always, let's go Flyers.
Want you to bleed for me.